Writer's block. To any author, it's a terrifying concept. Imagine yourself. You've got your first few pages or chapters down, and you've got your inner critic silenced, but then you have nothing to say. Your story has the brakes slammed on it because nothing is coming to mind. Today, we cover this infamous hang-up and methods to overcome it. Welcome back to WordSea, guidance for writers new and veteran. Writer's block, the bane of even the most experienced authors. So you're actually far from alone when it happens to you, and it happens to everybody. There's no set calling card, no clear warning signs that writer's block is approaching. It can arrive at random, even as you're hitting your stride in a project. Other times, it comes after you've been pulled away from a project for a time and you just can't find your footing again. Optimistically though, there's a lot of strategies you can use to break out of writer's block. So much so that you can even turn writer's block to your advantage. As we'll see, the key to breaking writer's block isn't writing harder, it's writing smarter. So since this topic is much more about method than mindset, we're going to jump right into our strategies, which will be the focus of this lesson. When I write, I try to cultivate the writer's version of a runner's high. It's that unconscious state you enter when you find your stride in writing, where everything else just kind of falls away. That state always helps me pull out of the swampiness of writer's block, so my strategies here are all about injecting energy and avoiding the swamp that tries to bog me down. Firstly, I always only ever write what I want to write. So deadlines are great for lighting a fire under you, but often those aren't sustainable for long-term personal writing. So when I'm in an action mood, I'll write an action scene. If I'm in a world-building mood, I'll do a world-building scene. Writer's block often occurs when we feel like we should be writing a specific something. Like, you should write the ending to a chapter. And if we just aren't jiving with what we should be doing, well, we can feel frustrated and feel stuck. So I only ever write what my brain is interested in writing. And now I don't blame you if you're skeptical of that advice. After all, if you really need to write the ending to that chapter, what's the use of, say, doing world building or an unrelated action scene? And my response is, time is an illusion, fictional time doubly so. Because writing has an advantage that virtually no other art form has. We invest nothing expensive into our craft. To write, all you really need is a pencil and paper or maybe a smartphone, meaning we lose nothing by experimenting or writing out of order. In fact, we can only gain by writing more, which is something I'll be covering in a later lesson about the habits of everyday writing. If a particular scene or chapter is giving you grief, jump to somewhere else in the project. If you're on chapter 5, write chapter 12, even if you don't exactly know where chapter 12 is going to be landing yet. If character A and character D have never had a scene together, give them one. It's all an experiment anyway. Nothing is permanent unless you want it to be. Some of my favorite character relations and some of my favorite chapters have actually arisen from what's called the road trip exercise. So the road trip exercise goes like this. Place 3 or 4 of your characters into a car that breaks down in the middle of nowhere en route to an important location. Ask yourself why your characters are going to that location, how they react to their car breaking down, and the like. Does someone take charge? Does someone panic? Does someone just start sprinting to the location hoping they can get there in time? Note that this exercise works even if you're writing, say, medieval fantasy or cosmic horror. It's an exercise that lets you play with character personalities and dialogue, and can not only help break you out of writer's block, but can also give you some unexpected revelations about your characters. I think of exercises like that of sort of like jumpstarting a car. If a car's battery's dead, another car can run its engine, charge its battery, and then jolt the first car back to life. And remember, running that first car's engine isn't a waste of time, it's a necessary part of the process. Julia Cameron also vouches for writing what you want to write. In her chapter, Let Yourself Listen, in her book The Right to Write, she suggests imagining yourself sitting against a tree with a storyteller on the other side of the trunk. She suggests that you write down, numbered 1 to 5, the stories you'd like the storyteller to tell you. If you're a writer of short stories, this advice can actually be applied literally. If one story isn't agreeing with you, suggest another for yourself, and try it out. But if you're more of a novelist, tell the storyteller about things you'd like to see happen in your book, either character interactions, or potential events or chapters. And try to be as extensive as possible here. Remember, you're trying to tell a master of storytelling what you'd like to hear. You'll only get out what you put in. If you find yourself in a rut, pick a different road to drive down. You never know how that road might loop back to the destination that you were after all along. Meanwhile, Roy Peter Clark, in his book Writing Tools, has two particularly helpful methods for breaking through writer's block, though he doesn't explicitly phrase them as such. Firstly, in his chapter Write Towards an Ending, Clark articulates the usefulness of writing out of order. He cites and appreciates the well-known anecdote that J.K. Rowling knew how the Harry Potter series would end before completing the first book. Now, this doesn't mean you're required to know your work's endings before you begin, but Clark argues that having even a tentative ending in mind can help you focus your thoughts so that you have a firmer sense of direction as you write, thereby avoiding a common cause of writer's block, writing without a direction or a purpose. Clark provides an extensive list of various endings to write towards. I'll highlight 3 here that promise to help you the most with writer's block. First is what he calls the time frame. He says, quote, "The writer creates a tick-tock structure with time advancing relentlessly. To end the story, the author decides what should happen last." To just expand a little on the previous point about writing yourself to an ending, Clark's advice has some far-reaching positives. Write a hypothetical ending for your story and ask yourself if you feel like there's gaps in your understandings of the characters. Do you know what they would have done if they were confronted with the situations, or character confrontations or interactions that make up your ending? If not, what gaps in character growth and plot construction need to be filled, so you can kind of tell what needs to be filled in the middle if you know where you are ending, and if you have an idea of where you are beginning. Second is what Clark calls problem and solution. He says, quote, "This common structure suggests its own ending. The writer frames a problem at the top and then offers readers possible solutions and resolutions. This can be broken down at a chapter or story level. Freely write down various solutions to problems, large or small, specific or thematic, personal or global, that your project explores. And don't be afraid to write a seemingly insane or unreasonable solution. One of your characters may just like the look of it, and you'll unexpectedly stumble into a greater understanding of them." Third is what Clark calls the Apt Quote, in which he writes, quote, "Some characters speak in endings, capturing in their own words a neat summary of distillation of what has come before. In most cases, the writer can write it better than a character can say it, but not always. Consider what sort of phrase, often accompanied by a striking image, you'd like to leave the Consider what sort of phrase, often accompanied by a striking image, you would like to leave the reader with. This activity is sort of like the problem solution and time frame strategies, but your ending is more interpretive than literal, more felt than seen. What sort of feeling would you like to leave your audience with? How would you like to articulate it, and who is the one narrating this final image? Choose a character to act as protagonist and narrator in the scene. Does he or she sound different than where you're at in the writing process? How have they grown? Are they saying something they would maybe never say before? If their voice sounds the same at the end as it does at the beginning, it may be time to send them, say, on a road trip and experiment. In all, there's many ways for you to do battle against writer's block. It's a tough opponent that can take on many forms, and it's as crafty as it is persistent. But armed with these new strategies, you're better equipped to take up arms against this ancient writer's foe, and maybe even discover your own strategies for beating writer's block. And that's going to close out this lesson. Next lesson, we'll explore strategies for dailiness, the habit of writing each and every day. I wish you all the best as you navigate the wide open WordSea and experience the wonder of writing. See you next time.